Every once in a long while, a game comes along that is so memorable, exciting, fresh, and well-written that it sets a new high-water mark for an entire genre. Baldur's Gate 3 is such an achievement for the tabletop role-playing-inspired, swords and sorcery adventuring that its BioWare-made CRPG predecessors helped popularize decades ago. Larian Studios has turned this corner of Dungeons & Dragons' Forgotten Realms into a beautiful, detailed world, stocked with too many fully realized, powerfully written, and skillfully voiced characters to count. There are heart-wrenching choices to be made, alliances to be forged, bears to be romanced, and a vast diversity of interesting, challenging, turn-based combat encounters. I didn't merely enjoy my 200+ hours on this journey, I fell in love. Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the greatest video games of all time. You already know this, of course. From the day it was released, the game made such a resounding impact that it was impossible for any gaming enthusiast not to hear its name. It received near-perfect scores, 10 out of 10 in almost every review, and an overwhelming majority of the gaming community declared it the greatest RPG of our generation. Watching all this unfold, I thought the praise was exaggerated, at least until I played the game myself. I kept telling myself that no game could possibly be that good and that it must have its fair share of flaws. To be honest, I wanted to have a contrarian opinion, just to offer a different perspective, but I couldn't. Honestly, I'm not afraid to say this. What the Beatles are to music history, Baldur's Gate 3 is to gaming history. In this video, I want to dive into why Baldur's Gate 3 is such an exceptional game, exploring its strengths and discussing why its value will only grow over time. I'm sure you've come across countless critique videos about this game. However, now that a year and a half has passed since its release, and with numerous patches enhancing the experience, I felt it was the perfect time to revisit this masterpiece and examine why it has left an unparalleled mark on gaming history. One issue video games have often run into when trying to adapt the experience of playing Dungeons & Dragons on the tabletop is that it's almost impossible to achieve the freedom and imagination you get to express in overcoming problems using real-world logic. It's hilarious in other RPGs when you have a spell that can blow an ogre to Kingdom Come, but is no match for the might of a wooden gate. And while it's doubtful that any game will ever match that level of flexibility, Baldur's Gate 3 is a big step forward from what we've been able to do in the likes of Skyrim or Dragon Age. Those gates aren't going to stop a determined warlock. If something looks flammable, you can probably light it up with a fire spell. If you want to save on lockpicks, most doors can be hacked down with a big enough axe. You can get to a lot of secret areas that other games would have blocked off with invisible walls by climbing and jumping. I was able to skip a huge boss fight by challenging a terrifying zombie guy to a drinking contest, and thanks to having a high enough constitution score, I goaded him into drinking himself to death while I was still roaring for more. This is a world that will rarely tell you no if you wonder if something is possible. In addition to this seemingly limitless freedom, you can invite up to 3 friends online to explore the mysteries of this world together and experience its vastness. I was genuinely surprised by how seamlessly the online co-op gameplay works. No matter what stage of the game you're in, your friends can join or leave at any time without disrupting the flow of your own adventure. This ensures that everyone's gameplay experience remains smooth and uninterrupted. Given how complex Baldur's Gate 3 is, that's impressive. It only gets better and funnier when you realize you can have one person distract a guard by talking to them while the other steals everything that's not nailed down behind their back. There's a huge amount of freedom in who you can be in this world as well. This character creator is one of the best I've seen outside of MMOs in a long time, featuring 29 different sub-races with unique abilities and models, if you count all the different colors of Dragonborn at least. Each of the 12 classes have at least 3 specializations that play quite differently, with wizards and clerics getting even more to choose from. I should also mention that, thanks to the mod support added to the game, you can expand the number of available classes beyond the main storyline. This update, which introduces modding capabilities, is an excellent idea for those who want to replay the game, offering even more variety and replayability. I just love the art direction on every humanoid, enemy, and even the outfits. It's not just the static model either. The variety of high-fidelity, performance-captured, expressive faces everyone can make is shockingly good for a game of this type, with hundreds of characters rather than a small, core cast who can be directed like they're in a live-action production such as The Last of Us. There's not a bit of awkward lip-syncing to be found. Larian's incredible attention to detail also extends to the area design and writing. That's exemplified by the city of Baldur's Gate itself, a hub full of life and adventure that came around to awe me anew, even though it took me 130 hours to reach the titular setting. Almost every citizen you'll encounter there has something to say about the unfolding events, and nosy exploration is consistently rewarded with new lore, new loot, and new quests. It's downright astounding how much voice acting Larian has crammed into these streets and how good nearly all of it is. There are dozens of random gossipers on street corners who are just as enthusiastically and professionally portrayed as the main cast, and rarely sound too similar to each other. I assume many of the actors involved must be responsible for more than one of these bit parts, but I can't tell just by listening like I can in some areas of Skyrim. When I think about the intricacies of the voice acting and dialogue writing, I still can't believe how this was even possible. We're talking about an immense amount of effort and craftsmanship on a scale that's truly unparalleled. One of Baldur's Gate 3's strongest and most unique aspects is the depth and richness of its companion characters. While we see ourselves as the main character, our party members technically serve as supporting characters. However, their stories, voice acting, and dialogues are so distinct and diverse that I found myself both thoroughly entertained and continuously amazed throughout my playthrough. First among this delightful cast are your companions, a motley crew of multi-layered, interestingly flawed characters who both grow and sometimes regress over the course of the campaign. The cheerful, eager tiefling Karlach, who has basically a demonic bomb instead of a heart, quickly became my best friend. I had flings with the dour cleric Shadowheart, the arrogant wizard Gale, and yes, the stoic Halsin, who can turn into a grizzly bear, among other creatures. There are plenty more where they came from, and they all have elaborate background stories and the capacity to significantly grow and change. The main villains, about whom I will spoil as little as possible, are just as richly written, with complex motives and their own individual brands of malice that inject new and greater threats into the last third of this epic-length adventure. I also really enjoyed Larian's approach to romance. Years of Mass Effect memes have proven that it's almost impossible to make 3D video game sex that's actually, well, sexy, and Baldur's Gate 3 hasn't changed the game there. Instead of trying to do that and failing badly, they build a lot of the magic into sensual wordplay, and most of the carnal encounters you can engage in are either really funny or serve more broadly to tell you something new about your partner, how they see the world, and what they value rather than simply flashing what's underneath their armor. When it was time to put our clothes back on and roll for initiative in combat, Baldur's Gate 3 never failed to impress me with the care and thoughtfulness with which the encounter design was set up to torture me. It's like each one is carefully crafted to make me want to scream at the dungeon master, "You bastard!" And I mean that in the best possible way. One fight involved teleporting imp creatures who garrote my party members before carting them off to separate locations, preventing spellcasting and forcing everyone to fend for themselves. The next might be against some terrifying insectoids who leave everyone literally petrified with fear, so I have to find a way to win without being able to move. The AI can be cunning and savage, especially on the top-level tactician difficulty. At no point have I been able to fall back on a repetitive grinding routine. You think on your feet or you die and reload your latest quick save. Your character and companions also take some time and experience to develop as effective killers, and the first 4 levels or so can feel unnecessarily brutal due to how fragile you are when you start out. That's mostly a product of adapting 5th edition D&D so closely, and Larian's designers didn't take it upon themselves to correct this long-running problem from the tabletop. They do, however, often give you ways to even the odds or avoid combat if you're clever. You'll do well to watch the environment for things like heavy objects hanging from a destructible thread above your enemies, or prep for combat by finding some isolated guards and kicking them over a railing while no one is looking. Rest assured, in this game there are multiple ways to initiate, sustain, and conclude a battle. The sheer variety of options is so beautifully detailed that it feels almost impossible not to want to replay the game over and over again. During combat, whenever I realized there was a different way I could have defeated my enemies, I found myself both regretful and excited at the same time. Your character and companions take some time and experience to develop as effective killers, but once my party got beefed up with 5 levels worth of upgrades and some magic items, I was happily blasting, slashing, and shooting my way through fights using all of the versatile abilities and environmental options at my disposal. The story spans over 3 acts that each took me around 50 hours to complete, playing like an obsessive completionist and finishing as many side objectives as I could. Each has a very distinct vibe and look, aided by an evocative and lively soundtrack. Act 1 is mostly idyllic wilderness, Act 2 is the spooky part, and Act 3 treats us to dense urban adventuring. It can feel a bit slow at times, since the first act had me chasing down several different leads to solve the same problem, and Act 2 presents more questions than it answers right up until the final set of confrontations. But discovering exciting new areas, strong side quest writing, and those consistently fun combat encounters meant I never lost motivation. The really amazing thing was not how big Baldur's Gate 3 is, though. Much has been made of its scope, but I would honestly not have minded if it were around half as long as it is. No, the magic is in how almost none of it feels like filler, no matter how far from the main quest you stray. Every random house I wandered into or side quest I picked up rewarded me with a memorable, unique, handcrafted role-playing experience. Even a random note found on the body of a bandit might tell a heartbreaking story about their past, which gives weight to every decision to fight and kill. It's all there for a reason. And while the first two acts have plenty of difficult choices, the big ones I had to make before committing to a final plan of action in Act 3 are a work of devilish genius. Without spoiling anything, realizing my enemies were so many steps ahead of me by the time I reached the city was heartbreaking, but I still felt empowered by the opportunities that remained to alter my own destiny and assemble a truly impressive coalition of allies. Impressively, the last stretch often called back to things I did and characters I saved 80 hours ago, which tied the whole tale together and made the world feel even more authentic. It's also an absolutely gorgeous game, from characters to environments. Whether you're exploring the sun-dappled forests that skirt mighty fortresses and abandoned towns or delving deep into the terrifying yet hauntingly beautiful, Underdark Baldur's Gate 3 is constantly surprising me with stunning new vistas. Around 20 hours in, after I thought I'd scoured every inch of the Underdark, I stumbled across a village of sentient mushroom folk, and a wealth of new quests and stories along with it. This is not a story that takes for granted that you are a hero. It's one that truly stares you down and demands that you prove it, if that's really what you're made of. The lead up to the finale backed me into a corner with a dozen ways out, but each one would require me to compromise on what I believe in one way or another. This elevates the tension and the storytelling to new heights, which is impressive given how strong it had been up to that point. There were quests that made me cry, quests that made me yell, "What?" out loud, and quests that genuinely creeped me out. And the variations in not only the ending, but also so many other smaller stories have me eager to play it all over again. And that's really saying something, when Baldur's Gate 3 has been my full-time job for the last 2 months. Variations in not only the ending, but also so many other smaller stories have me eager to play it all over again. As I march ever nearer to the 200-hour mark, I think the thing that amazes me most is that I'm already looking forward to starting Baldur's Gate 3 all over again with a new character and new goals. Every action has a reaction. Every choice has a consequence, be it long-term or immediate. It's fascinating to see how differently my adventure has played out in conversations with friends, and how sometimes my best intentions in-game can lead to seriously unexpected fallout. And yet, I never find myself reloading or going back after a decision doesn't quite unfold the way I wanted it to. Part of the fun, at least for me, is rolling with the unexpected and seeing where the adventure takes me. I completed my first playthrough as a half-elf wizard, striving to uphold a strong moral compass in all my decisions. Yet, there were moments when I was forced to make choices against my values for the sake of self-interest, even leading to the demise of some innocents. This is what makes Baldur's Gate 3 truly remarkable. It places you in difficult, real-world-like dilemmas, preventing you from being purely good or purely evil. There's always a gray area in your decisions, and at times, the game challenges you so deeply that you find yourself contemplating your choices for minutes on end. In my first game, I pursued a relationship with Shadowheart. I managed to avoid killing anyone in my party, except for Lae'zel, whom I had to eliminate for the greater good. That's the kind of experience this game offers, raw, complex, and unforgettable. The beauty of Dungeons & Dragons is that you really can do anything, and Baldur's Gate 3 has beautifully translated this design philosophy. It is content to sit back and give you near total freedom to solve problems. This ranges from obvious tricks, like being able to cast a water spell followed by a cold spell to create a sheet of ice that enemies slip on, to much subtler and more imaginative systems. When I reached the aforementioned goblin camp, tasked with picking off its 3 leaders, I was able to take a full-on hitman approach and trick them into a series of hilariously gruesome deaths which could never actually be pinned on me. I could have simply stormed the front door and killed them all if I'd wanted to, and was strong enough, or I could have sided with them and helped them find what they were looking for. The choice is always absolutely 100% yours. Then there's the main cast of characters and a hornier, goofier crew of idiots you won't ever find. From my absolute base Shadowheart to the Riz-drenched wizard Gale, I love each and every member of my party with all my heart. Every single one of them comes with their own fascinating backstory, and watching their personalities and personal goals clash over the course of the game leads to some seriously tough decisions further down the road. If they're not trying to bang you, they're trying to kill one another. It's gloriously dramatic, and the writing and performances are consistently stellar across the board. Whether you're helping a gnome stage a jailbreak or engaging in fate of the world encounters, every single story, every single choice feels relevant and weighty. I don't want to say every CRPG going forward should aspire to be like Baldur's Gate 3. Not everything needs to be nearly this big and ambitious or even this dense, but it is a landmark moment in the genre. And if I had to point to one paragon that I would like everyone else making these to take inspiration from, this is absolutely it. I waited 14 years for the stars to align again so that we could get the ideal mix of crunchy, tactical, old-school RPG combat, an epic and well-written story with complex characters and lots of meaningful choices, and a level of polish and cinematic presentation that let me see the sweat and the sorrow on characters' faces in their darkest hours. Plenty of other games have partially completed that list, but the last time they all came together was Dragon Age: Origins in 2009. And I can finally say that game, and its Infinity Engine predecessors, have a worthy successor that's not just matched their RPG greatness, but surpassed it. Baldur's Gate 3 is just about everything I could have asked for. If you enjoy my content and want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me in creating content, you can buy me a coffee through the link in the video description. See you next video.